Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Perfect.
So anyway, first of all, let me say thank you very much for joining us, Nika. Nika is a very great friend of mine, and I've had the privilege of being able to go to her events in and around Barcelona for the last 2 years, actually. And I'm going to let her introduce herself later, just so I can give you guys some info about CodeOp and what we're doing here and this session this evening. We are recording this event, just so you know. Feel free to show your faces if you would like to. We'd be very happy to see them. But I also understand that, yes, of course, you might not want to. As we go through the chat, Nico is going to have some question and answer sections. So please feel free to interact with those. And if there's anything that comes up, feel very free to use the chat. And I will try and introduce it if I can, or alert Nika to the fact that you guys have any questions. What I want to basically say, just to give you guys an overview, I don't know how much you know about CodeOp, but we are an international coding school based in Barcelona. However, we have applications and students come to us from all over the world. We have been around for 2 years now, and we have a very specific mission. We are a school that is specifically for women, transgender and non-binary individuals. And we run several programs, so it's not just a coding bootcamp. So we do obviously full stack development courses, bootcamps. However, we also do courses in product management and data analytics. The main idea, the idea of CodeOp is this mission to try and reduce the gender gap in the tech industry. And the idea behind SubVersions, this event series that we're doing, is to kind of showcase that so much more is going on in the background of tech than what we are exposed to every day. And there are so many people and interesting projects on the margins of tech. And there are many people who then come from these different backgrounds who aren't the usual tech faces that you're seeing that are working in these areas that also deserve to be highlighted. And it's super interesting. And these are the things that I think actually are the true disruptive things that are taking place in tech. And so we wanted to kind of bring some of these insights to our community, which is the most important thing that we're building here at CodeOp. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Nika to you. Actually, what I'm going to do is introduce Nika and let her introduce herself, because she's going to do that so much better and let you know all the things that she does as a freelance sommelier.
Thank you so much, Jiro. Thanks to CodeOp for having me. I feel very privileged to join such a diverse group of professionals and experts from different fields that have spoken and will be speaking in SubVersion series. And lovely to see all of you. As Jiro said, if at some point you'd like to share your faces, feel free. And of course, at any point of this hour-ish, a bit more, feel free to leave any comment, question in the chat. Although, as we said, there will be also a specific time for questions. I'm very happy to take them. So I guess this is the time I tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Nika. Not a very Mediterranean name, so I'm originally from south of Russia. Yes, south of northern country, it is Russia. And yes, there is wine in Russia. I was actually born quite close. I was born in one of the winemaking regions of Russia. Spent my first 17 vintages in Russia and then moved to Spain with my family, pretty much about 17 years ago. And this is where I started my, my first degree in my background is languages and communication. And this is what I've been doing in Spain, in Barcelona specifically. And for about 6 years, I've been working in wine. I specialize in wine consulting currently for export and import, so helping Spanish wineries take their amazing wines abroad, mostly to the UK and Russia. I also consult Barcelona local restaurants to help them showcase exciting wine gems for the wine lovers in the city. I host events that's since a few months, there have been online events, of course. We all went digital, those of us who had done so before. And I also teach at a local wine school called Work and Return. I teach international certification called WSET. And Jiro has not mentioned it, but she is actually in possession of a fairly advanced level of the wine certification. And so really what interests me a lot, my area of interest in wine, there are a few different topics. I focus a lot of social aspects of wine. I run a networking club in Barcelona called Wine Witches, and it's all female networking group where we foster personal, professional relationships. So definitely gender imbalance in one industry, it's definitely imbalance as in so many others, is something that's very interesting to me. Sustainability, that comes in many ways. Social sustainability is just one of them, but also sustainability understood, I guess, more traditionally in an environmental way. And last but not least, something that I'm excited to share with you today is innovation and technology in the wine industry. Perhaps my industry, the wine industry, is one of the most traditional ones that you will be hearing about in this series of fireside chats. So sometimes innovation and technology comes, we're a little bit late to commit compared to so many other industries. But I hope that I'll show you some things that will surprise you. I also hope that you like wine, you enjoy wine, and maybe other beverages, because some of the things we'll be chatting about apply to other drinks as well, not just wine. And yes, sorry. And what I'm going to do now, just to make this a little bit more fun and interactive, unfortunately, we can't all virtually drink and sip wine. If you are sipping a glass of wine, that's fantastic. But what we can do is have a little bit of a visual aid to help us understand what's going on in wine, technology, and how basically how science and technology are shaping the way we drink. So what I'm going to do is, as I said, share some of the insights I've put together for this Wine in Tech series, and it's all about different aspects of the industry and how they connected. This is my project, Wine Alphabet. That's where I do all of the things I mentioned. And Wine Alphabet, I think it's something that many of you can relate to. We learn alphabets in all areas of our life. We learn alphabet of our own mother tongue when we're born. We learn different alphabet of different languages. Can be an emotional language, can be language of love, can be a work code, professional code. Wine industry, of course, called it lingo and speak. Tech industry in all of its different areas, there's lots of new terms, so new alphabets, so to speak, to learn. So I think that's something we can relate to. Any new areas, any new endeavor in our life, we begin by learning the language and the alphabet of it. And so wine and tech, things that I wanted to share with you today, I broke them into 4 different parts to see what all kind of innovation are happening right now, this past few years. The first section is all about different apps and different devices that help us to drink smart, that help us to navigate the difficult world of wine. Even for wine professionals, you know, it's still very tricky for us. Don't believe anyone that says they know everything about wine. It's virtually impossible. There are so many different regions, grapes, constantly changing ones, some new grapes emerging as well, new regions, etc., etc. So we do need technology to help us. Second section is about artificial intelligence in wine. There are some really interesting things going on. Data analysis is used in a very fascinating way. So we're going to look at one project that does, that is going to be launched very soon. Third aspect, I would name it here, other species on the vineyards. So that would be drones, robots. So how technology and science can help us in the agricultural aspect of wine, in the viticulture. And last but not least, I'm sure, I imagine you all savvy wine lovers, or just wine enthusiasts. And one of the places we used to enjoy wine before COVID, at least, is definitely in hospitality, restaurants, wine bars, taverns, etc. So there are some innovations happening there as well. So those are the 4 areas, and let's start digging into the first one: drinking smart. See what happens there. So in wine, when we say to drink smart, this is essentially what we mean. We look at different use of augmented reality. AR in wine is a relatively recent thing, just the past few years, really. We still look at QR codes as innovation. They're just being used in different ways. And of course, QR codes have been around in grocery generally, in food for such a long time. But as said, wine has caught up a little bit later. We're going to talk about them, see what purpose they make, how they can help you to make your wine decisions, and also some smart devices, predominantly for wine professionals, but also for, I would say, advanced wine enthusiasts. And I'm going to explain some terms if you need me to. Of course, don't worry. Please ask any questions, any terms, anything that seems unfamiliar. Right. So AR, I don't know if there are any Walking Dead fans in the room, but essentially Sheriff Rick has made its way into the wine world. And so this is a company called The Last Wine Company that has imagined this post-apocalyptic scenario where pretty much all that's left on the face of Earth is, yes, the living dead and wine. And so what they're doing is they've developed an app called the Living Wine Labels, and all of their labels for their wines are augmented reality. And it's very straightforward. You scan your label and you bring to life all of the different characters from The Walking Dead. And they have 4 wines in the range. The market is predominantly US. These wines are not widely available in Europe, if available at all, but they're definitely fairly big in the United States at the moment, and they've proved quite popular. Even more popular is this series from a Treasury wine estate. It's a series of wines called 19 Crimes. So 19 Crimes, very interestingly, they represented different historic criminals who were exiled to Australia for at least of the 19 crimes that bore such punishment. So of course, we're talking about times when actually being shipped to Australia or to the United States from places like the United Kingdom would be a punishment in itself. So what were some of the crimes that would bear such punishment? Impersonated an Egyptian is one, okay. Clandestine marriage would be another one. So again, this is a bit of a story behind it. You see different historic criminals, you see different crimes, you download your app, the same app, the Living Labels app, and you find out about all of those stories. There was another series about historic female characters, history's most accomplished females, including the likes of Josephine Baker, who was an entertainer, activist, and a French resistance agent, or a singer like Celia Cruz, okay? So all of that, again, to engage consumers, to boost the sales, of course, and 19 Crimes specifically has been very, very successful. You can even get in Europe, if you're based in Europe, from a few different online retailers. As for the female series, Embracing, I find it interesting that it's mainly been popular in the US and not so much in Europe. At least I haven't been able to find a straightforward way to get them. So this is basically your augmented reality. Of course, through AR, we're not looking to give any technical information. We're really looking to give our wine lover a story behind the label, because a bottle is always either history or a story in the bottle, and very often it's both. So this is the AR. What are we actually looking for from the QR? So often they present information that would be too bulky and too long to put in a wine label. So if you want to go a little bit deeper into specific types of soils, etc., but you can also offer some very practical and graphic way of presenting something as easy as food pairing, or recommended storage temperature, recommended serving temperature, maybe a region, etc. A winery could also include their accolades, all of the different awards. You probably always use, if you've shopped wine and different wine stores, you've seen all those golden medals and silver medals, etc. Of course, no winery would present any criticism of the wines. It would only be accolades. Also, QR is not just a shelf talker. It's not just a reference point for a consumer to engage with the wine, to start exploring it. They have also been used to detect counterfeit, because counterfeit in wine industry is a big problem. There's a documentary on that called Sour Grapes. And before that, what we used to use on the bottles is serialization and holograms. But that one relies too heavily on the supply chain. What the QR code embedded in the label does is that it allows the winery, the producer, directly to protect their wines from counterfeits. And this raises a very interesting question, which I'm sure you debate constantly in different industries you might be working on, is data protection. So, of course, all the consumer information of a person who scans a QR is trackable. And here we enter the dangerous territory of ownership of the data. How the data is used, what are the companies, producers or distributors are then doing with those consumers' data, what is the potential consent that should be given, because let's face it, in the same way we download trillions of apps, we don't really think about properly going through terms and conditions. Of course, even the same happens with the QR codes of the wines. You're shopping for a wine, you're overwhelmed, there's so many choices. Someone is texting you about the dinner they're making, you have to make a quick decision, you scan it, and most likely right away, all your data are given away to large companies. So data ownership here is, of course, a very, very important topic to bear in mind. Okay, now something a little bit geekier, hope not too geeky. You've probably heard or seen your wine-loving friends or relatives swirling their glass endlessly and speaking about the need to aerate or oxygenate the wine, or for the wine to open up. So typically we do it just by swirling the glass. We expose our wine to a bit of air for it to fully open up the aromas and flavors typically, and to soften it a little bit. Now, this is the first smart wine aerator. Before, there used to be some kind of mechanical, electric aerators, but this is integrated with an app. So what it does is you scan the label, then all the data gathered through AI determines the bottle, and it uses info on parameters such as grape, vintage, color, to calibrate the right amount of air to incorporate. Because I could be swirling my glass for 10 minutes, but I could be overexposing my wine to the air. If it's too subtle, maybe too much oxygen won't do it good. And unless I've accumulated wealth of information on the type of wine, I would not be able to make a decision. How long do I swirl the glass? How long does it need to be exposed to the air? What Avian, it's called, does is, as I said, you scan the label, it goes into the database, get it through AI, and it gives you the information on how long you need to aerate it. You can use the app independently, just get information on the wine. The app is free of charge, but then of course the aerator itself is not. It's placed on the bottleneck. It's got temperature sensor, different types of sensor, and as you see, it aerates it into your glass. And another smart thing, sophisticated device, is iSommelier. It's a smart decanter. So decanting, again, is very tricky. That's one of the things that most of my wine students and anyone who begins in the wine industry is very confused about. Why do I decant wine? Why do I pour it from one vessel to another? Is it for old wines? Is it for young wines? Is it for red? Is it for white wines? There's no simple answer. Typically, decanting generally is for full-bodied reds, very aged wines, or reductive styles. Again, you have to be very knowledgeable to be able to determine when and how long to decant for. And typically not everyone has the time or possibility to decant a few hours ahead or even an hour ahead. Sometimes your guests just, you just have guests, you have people over, you want to open specific wine, but maybe it's not quite ready and you need to decant it. Perhaps there is sediment in the bottle that you'd like to get rid of before serving because the wine is old or because it's a style. So what iSommelier does, again, it's shortens the time of decanting to 1 minute. Okay, it's very quick. And it gives you, it basically, based on the AI as well, it determines for how long the wine should be decanted. So as you can see, very smart users of data, working with data generally. A lot of things are being developed there. Pretty much all of them rely on the mobile app, because a mobile phone, a smartphone, is something that in most parts of the world, it's something that our wine lover always have in their hands. Where they shopping, where they cooking at home, where they decanting their wine at home, they're always going to be near their smart device. So it's a very clever way of incorporating it into all aspects of shopping, enjoying, and handling the wine generally. And these are just some of the apps that I wanted to show you, not to talk about all of them in too much depth, but maybe just highlight some of them. I'm of course going to ask you if you maybe heard of any of them or you use any of them, but let's just kind of try and group them. So the first, I guess the most well-known category is what many people call TripAdvisor for wine. So it's crowdsourced, reviews-based database containing many different wines. The most popular wine app in this category is Vivino. And another one that's quite big is Delectable. Scanning the label, going into their own AI powered database. The app then will give you all of information on vintage, tasting note, will show all of those TripAdvisor user reviews. It will incorporate professional reviews. It will also give you opportunity to purchase the wine directly. So very helpful to navigate the world of wine. There have been some criticism, inaccuracy, etc. But they're constantly improving, especially Vivino has been about for quite some time, so we're definitely improving. What other things? This, by the way, is a little bit catered to maybe the US. In Spain, situation, for instance, is a bit different. So the good example of difference is something called Drizzly. Those of you who lived or are in the United States will be familiar with the website. Maybe it's essentially your one-stop shop for all things wines and liquors. Because as you know, in the US, one can't just buy them in the regular supermarket or grocery store. So there is an app called Drizzly that allows you to order your wine or spirits and get them delivered to your house. Here in Barcelona, it wouldn't really work because we have Glovo that allows to buy wines and other beverages until 3 a.m. actually, if they haven't changed the legislation, from those places that obviously are still offering alcohol. But in the US, Drizzly is very big. And then there are different things like Winery Passport, where you get virtual stamps for visiting different wineries, can get in touch with community, etc. There's one that I think I would love to have for Europe, but unfortunately it's US only for now. That it's called Corkage Fee. I don't know if it's something you've ever done, but I don't know if you've ever gone to a restaurant and felt this is a great place, the food is amazing. The wine list, not so much. If only I could bring that great bottle of wine I have at home, I wouldn't even mind paying for doing that if they let me. Well, many places, of course, do that, and they charge what we call a corkage fee. So this app tells you that, what places charge or don't even charge corkage fee and where they're located. As said, so far, only available in the United States. And then things like Hello Vino, a virtual wine assistant that builds your sensory profile. It takes a little test, it figures out what wines you like, and then it's kind of an individual wine shopper in a way, if you want. That will show you options based on your flavor profile. Do you like your wines less sweet, more sweet, fruitier, less fruity, etc., etc. I'm gonna stop talking for a while and actually ask you guys, if you like to leave any comments in the chat, have you used any of the wine apps? Or maybe if you haven't used any wine apps, have you considered, have you ever wanted to have something that would help you shop for wine or drink wine? A website, an app, something that would just make your wine drinking life a little bit easier? Or you're not at that stage yet, perhaps? Okay. Ajira, how do you find Vivino? Do you find it useful for you? Do you rely on it a lot?
No, yeah, so just to chip in, not really actually. I'm really terrible when it comes to wine and apps and things. Like I always forget in the situation where I should be using it. I always forget that I can use the app to like check a wine and check references and stuff. So it's mainly like me using it in retrospect. Like if there's a wine that I buy and then I look it up to see what the details are or information or to inform people that I'm with like about the wine. But I'm not really very good at using it proactively. And I don't know if that's anything to do with me thinking of the functionality and it doesn't work for me, or if it's just me like
because you are did you find yourself as heavy app user in other areas of your life?
No, this is also I'm not a huge app user. I mean, I'll use certain things for things that I like. I mean, obviously I use the normal apps everyone uses from day to day. I use apps for like shopping and this type of thing, but I'm not I'm still maybe a bit old-fashioned, which is weird because I'm working for a coding school. But in terms of like getting my information and wanting to speak to people and wanting to go into shops and speaking to the people who are selling wines. And yeah, I mean, obviously I have the great the great situation of having you as a friend. So there's also like someone like you to go to and talk about things like this. So I really like receiving information in this way. So I think that's what makes me less likely to use apps.
Well, I think this is a great point you're making there, because wine traditionally has been a very social affair. There's always been interaction involved, but also I think unfortunately the interaction has mostly been very linear. There's someone who's in a position of expert to believe themselves in a position of being an expert, and another person who is kind of asking interaction advice, which is fine. But I think that's also probably fostered quite a bit of snobbery in wine, and I believe that's what many people think, especially those in app development, but those kind of apps have democratized those interactions. You don't have to feel bad about not knowing what the main grapes of Burgundy are or what a Pinot Noir from Oregon should taste like. You can just go and ask an app. Because even in situations in a wine shop with a shop assistant, some people still feel intimidated. And I guess there would be one advantageous point of the app. I actually, another question yes, Rebecca. Absolutely, there is a community of snobs on the apps too. Thank you for bringing it up. One thing you have to understand is that apps in a way very similar to social media. So not many people are probably going to post a bottle of €2 bottle they bought in their large supermarket. They're going to post the rare expensive labels they've enjoyed, etc. So there is a bit of that as well. Show the best side, show the bright side. There is that community of snobs, some specific derisive comments perhaps, yeah, for sure. But I guess compared to the in-person wine world, it can feel a little bit liberating. So my second question to you guys is, well, I guess I'm going to answer it myself. I was going to ask you if you miss any app for your wine. And I wanted to link it to the question whether you use any apps for your grocery shopping. So when you shop for food, are there any apps that you use at all? I guess I don't necessarily mean like specific supermarket apps that give you, well, maybe I do, if you wanted to include those. So when you shop for grocery, do you use any apps at all that give you some kind of information or do anything for you?
So I'm going to just jump in again because it's super interesting. So I don't, but you were just talking about maybe things that that people miss. Maybe this is specific for me because I just did a bit of wine study, and I'm always very curious if I go somewhere. I mean, so like very recently I was in Greece just a few days ago, and I know some things about some grapes, so Assyrtiko, etc. But there are more grapes there, and I don't know the taste profiles or anything of these grapes. So it would be really cool for me to be able to look and see what kind of the tastes are in terms of if I'm at a restaurant and I want to choose food. I'm just kind of having a guessing game at choosing this Greek wine or this Greek wine. I don't actually know what the flavors of certain things are. So maybe it's super niche, but for me, that would be really cool if I could just go to something and know, like, yeah, what the grapes are, or there was a resource, because obviously, I mean, like you're saying, some apps are very driven to certain markets. And if you start going into certain markets where these wines aren't going to be, you're not going to be able to find this information about wines that you want to purchase from Greece or, yeah, you know, these kind of places. So, or Georgia or things like this. So, yeah.
Most of them have geolocation. They geolocation tagged, obviously. So Vivino, for instance, would cater to your location. You brought up an interesting topic that I'm going to cover in a different section: choosing wine in hospitality context, being in a restaurant. Is there any help for us? But yeah, no, thank you. What I wanted to bring up, finishing on the topic of apps and moving on to the next bit, is a friend of mine recently told me about this app called Yuka, with 1K, I've put it in the chat. And that basically, their claim is make the right choices for your health. So it deciphers product labels and analyzes the health impact of your food products and cosmetics. And obviously, as said, sustainability in wine is a big thing. One of our attendants today, Rebecca, she runs a natural wine magazine. So I know she would love to talk about sustainability maybe later on. But yeah, sustainability in how the wine is made, looking into the vineyard, what we're doing on the vineyard, how sustainably it's made. Is it organic certified? Is it organically farmed? Is it biodynamic, etc.? At the end of the day, there is a lot of environmental impact, but also the final product, wine, does have a health impact on us. It's a beverage. Of course, it's going to be to have health impact. And because of the reluctance of most wine producers to disclose that sort of information on the label, it is essentially impossible right now to create an app similar to Yuka for wine that would scan the label and tell you about the health impact on this wine, because the label itself does not present sufficient information on that. But for me personally, that would be really interesting. I'd be wanting to know how sustainably wine is made, what's the level of sulfites, what kind of clarifying and fining agents have been used if I'm a vegetarian or vegan, have the animal products, animal-derived products been used, etc., etc. So I was thinking, if anyone, guys, wants to make an app like that, determine the health impact of a wine, there's definitely a lot of niche there, but the regulation is such that the necessary information and the data is not always available, but perhaps something to have in mind for the future. Okay, so let's move on to the next bit, more exciting things I wanted to share with you. And it's a section I've named Super Tasters, about this fascinating company located in San Luis Obispo in the US called Tastery. They have this unique technology that's still patent pending. And it's essentially, they are a sensory company that matches products to people. They started with wines. And I'm now going to explain you what they do exactly, but this is really a fascinating project with a very clever use of lots of different data. So they begin by mapping your palate. They profile the customer palate through artificial intelligence. Wineries would send bottles to the company. Those would get tested and analyzed in their labs, and the data from each product analysis would be put into their AI engine. It's a proprietary engine where it learns each product in its place and compares the product and also matches it to customer's palate. Now, what is customer's palate? Basically, a customer, wine lover, creates an account on the app, take a simple survey in terms of basic taste preferences, etc. I'm going to show you a snippet of that now, and get percentage matches on their palate profile versus a specific wine. So a bit like a Tinder for wine, if you like. What's your match to a specific wine? How that information can be used. Of course, it's great for a consumer to have that match for their palate, but then they're taking it a step further. They have these in-store kiosks, which are essentially virtual shop assistants. You go to one of those, as a shopper in a physical location, and you engage with a kiosk. It's touch screen, you can build your palette profile, you can match it to the existing range in the store, you can get additional information. And of course, for the stores, and again, we're going to data ownership issue or question. This allows to gather all sorts of intelligence about customer preferences, customer loyalty. It allows them to increase sales. It allows them to obtain so many retail insights. And then last but not least is the wine insights they have for the wineries. So based on that analysis, they do what they call predictive wine chemistry. So they can say this wine is maybe, the current taste in the state of California right now is wines that are slightly sweeter or less sweet or more tannic or less tannic, or dark berries are going to work better. So this is possible thanks to that comprehensive chemical analysis. It's not something that's very new. Concocting these wines. Actually, Treasury Estates Group, which owns 19 Crimes and also brands like Penfolds, Stag's Leap, that are very big in the US, also does that. This, for their masstige wines, between say $5 and $15 a bottle, they predict the wines that are going to be popular with the customers based on those studies, because they carry out a lot of those, a lot of that research. And so they can say, well, I can tell you already, the wines that are still very big and popular in the US specifically, European taste generally is a bit different, are still on the sweeter side. So maybe off dry, not so dry, not too tannic, so a bit softer on the palate. Acidity not too high. It all has to be round. It all has to, as you know, generally, and I'm not generalizing, this is real data, Americans do tend to consume much more sugar compared to so many other parts of the world. So all of that is going to show in their wine preferences. So the predictive wine chemistry has been done before. And now what Tastery is doing is, as I said, taking it a step further, thanks to that proprietary engine they have built. Okay. There you go. So for instance, on the left, you have a taste survey. It would ask you things like, how do you feel about the smell of flowers? What kind of chocolate do you prefer? White chocolate, dark chocolate? Where's my fruit jelly? Things like that. And based on that, you would get your matches. And then of course, the app would offer you to purchase them directly from wineries or from major retailers. So quite smart. It's patent pending, as I've said, so it's still being developed, but you can have a good look on the website. I think it's going to be an exciting project. Generally, trying to analyze our taste, our palate. Well, and taste is something quite fascinating. There's a lot of research being done in other parts of the world. So in Dresden, there's one of the very famous institutes for studying different sensory aspects. And there's a lot of ideas that we learned that are up for debate now. So one thing that you've probably learned is that we have specific areas of our tongue that perceive specific taste. So we're meant to perceive acid flavors on the sides, sweetness on the tip of our tongue. This is quite untrue. That's been proved inaccurate because clusters of taste buds on the tongue, there are from 2 to 10,000 in total. They really not only just on our tongue, they're on other parts of our body as well. And so when wine hits your tongue, it really dissolves into substances, and all the tongue is really working very hard to be able to identify the taste of the wine and other products. Another statement that's been kind of floating around forever, and it's also now being revisited by researchers, is that humans can only perceive 5 tastes. Sweet, bitter, salty, sour, and umami. The kind of savory, meaty intensity. But now the scientists are also expanding our basic taste range to things like calcium, metallic, soapy, and a thing called oleogustus, where we can perceive fat, although fat can also be a texture. So that said, despite a lot of research being done in the area of taste and palates generally, human palate is still fairly inaccurate. There's also been a lot of studies done where even in professional wine competition, judges getting different results. Even professional wine critics thinking they're drinking different wine when in fact it has been the same one, etc., etc. So of course, these sort of very objective analysis, breaking the wine down into its most basic chemical parts, is quite interesting. And relying on AI to process all of that information is also one of the directions that the future of wine industry is going into. So I would watch AI used in that sense quite closely. Right, now I'm going to show you some friends, some technology friends, and see what's going on the vineyards in the source of the wine. So an exciting project that's called Vitis Gen 2. So it's a continuation of one that was already existing that uses genetic data, including DNA sequences and phenotype data. I'm going to speak about that, don't worry. Then, of course, we have robots on the vineyards carrying out different tasks. And we have drones. Mainly, what technology is helping us with on the vineyard is time management, makes everything more effective, cost effective and labor effective, but also it's of great help in the fight against global warming and climate change generally. Because as I've said, you remember I said in the beginning, there are new regions popping up in the world. How is that possible? Do we not know where wine is being made currently? Well, we do, but we humans managed to change our planet so much, so quickly, that new possibilities are opening up, temperatures are growing, season temperatures are constantly changing, and there's a lot of problems related to that for our grapes, and so technology helps us with that. So let's look a little bit closer. Let me show you some examples. These are just a couple of robots on the vineyards. The first one is called Vine Scout, and it actually was invented in Valencia in Spain. So these robots can do a lot of different things. It analyzes things like nitrogen level in the soil. It measures canopy leaf temperature. It has things like a stereoscopic machine vision system, ultrasound sensors, and then it helps winemakers to calculate harvest timing and water measurements for basically watering the vineyards. Because every year, like one conversation we in the wine industry, we constantly have with winemakers: how's the harvest? When are you harvesting? What's the harvest like this year? And sometimes human control is not enough, human input is not enough to gather necessary information. So robots like Vine Scout, they help with that. They can monitor large areas under vines in short amounts of time and process that information quite quickly. The one on the right is currently used by Rémi Martin. So if any cognac lovers are here, they definitely using some cutting edge technology. So this guy is called Ted, and they call him a soil robot. So he eliminates weeds under the wines, which is quite important, because if you eliminate weeds under the wines, there's less plants competing for water. So you alleviate competition for water and also nitrogen supply. And it also does some pruning, okay? So this allows to avoid using chemical weed killers. It's electric. There's only 15 in the world right now. And as said, Rémi Martin is one of the big brands currently using it. This is the project that I mentioned, the Vitis Gen 2. That, as I've said, mentioned genetic data from different grapes, okay? They include some DNA sequencing data, and also they use what we call phenotype data. In grapes, that would be the quality of the fruit, disease resistance, so for example, resistance to things like powdery mildew, and cold tolerance. And this is very important. This is what I've been talking about. Climate change doesn't only mean global warming, you know, it's much more complex than that. And actually the way viticulture has been affected is that we can make wine not only in areas that before were deemed too cold, but also the other way around, in areas that before were deemed too hot. So we do need cold resistant grapes, because generally, although the global temperature is generally on the rise, there are also some areas that is getting coldest. So we need to be prepared for everything in terms of grapes. And so what this does, we collect phenotype and genetic data, put that into a database, and then we determine which specific sequence or marker is associated with specific trait. And so we looked at different traits in different cultivars, different types of grapes, and see if they possess the desired quality. So kind of like scanning through a book and looking for keywords. So for instance, I'm looking for cold resistant traits. Do I find them? And then what they do, they make a cross between different grapes using conventional techniques. But using the same technology, normally if I crossbreed two types of grapes, I need to wait several years for it to bear fruit. And so I'm able to analyze it. This will allow me to see within months, analyzing the leaf, if you see here, whether that grape is apt for what I need. So we basically, as a result of this Vitis Gen 2 project, we're looking for available grape cultivars that will deal well with climate change and different diseases, okay? So it's not uncommon in a few years to see new grapes popping up on our shelves. It's not gonna be all Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. You can already see it now, plenty of wonderful indigenous grapes, but this is also the future. Crossbreeding that has been done in the US and Canada quite extensively, not so much in Europe, and now Europe has also come in there. They understand that science can offer some of the solution, okay, for that. So I don't know if you've had any question in the meanwhile, but if you didn't, I have more questions for you. So I touched upon data ownership a couple of times. You can see it's a sensitive topic for me personally, I think, not just for me. How mindful you think you are with your personal data use generally when using apps, websites, different platforms? Is it something that's on your mind personally or professionally, perhaps in your area? Because it's really not talked about much in the wine industry, because as said, wine and tech generally is still in the early years of their marriage to the extent compared to use of technology in other industries. But I think it's going to be coming up more and more. Okay, I'll leave you thinking about data ownership. It's a big topic, I understand. Maybe not apt for comments in the chat. But yeah, if anyone wants to share anything later, I'll be happy to hear from you. And so after that, yes, absolutely. Feel free to answer in the chat. You don't have to put a tie on and put the video on. Feel free to leave the comment in the chat. Okay, in the meanwhile, we're gonna jump to the last bit of my presentation today, and that's all about hospitality, restaurants, bars, and what kind of innovations have we seen there. Right. So, jumping ahead a little bit, nothing too groundbreaking, especially compared to what's happening in the vineyards. Hospitality, we're doing some things in terms of wine industry, but still a bit of catching up to do. A lot of hospitality has to do with wine apps, which we already talked about, but let's see what else is happening. So wine on tap, we're going to talk about it now. And there are a few places to enjoy fantastic wine on tap now in the world. Digitized wine list, which partly answers the question or issue that Jira has brought up, and new ways of offering wine by the glass. Not so new, some of them have been around for a few years, but maybe new for some of us. And augmented reality, which I think we covered. But of course, it's still applicable in the context of a restaurant. You order a bottle, there's an AR, maybe the wine manager or sommelier tells you about it, you scan it, you interact, it's a story. It makes the table laugh. It's a conversation starter. It's fun, which at the end is what we're looking to bring into some emotion into the wine experience. But let's look at this wine on tap business. So how many times have we sat in a bar, restaurant, and this for me it's a few times, but how many times have we sat in a bar, restaurant, and seen a keg of beer being changed, being replaced? I don't know about you guys, but maybe here in Barcelona or Spain generally it happens quite a lot. Have to replace the keg, they bring in the keg, and it's always beer, right? Well, guess what? Kegged wine has been around for quite some time. In Europe, we talk about maybe about 40 years, and in the US, about 30 years. So wine in kegs, wine put in stainless steel kegs directly at the source, at the winery. It's stainless steel kegs or cylinders. And of course, as with many, well, not with many innovations, with some innovations, they start at very high end, but with other innovations, they start at a mass market level. This was the latter. They started with cheap and cheerful, lowest quality, lowest prices. And then gradually they started increasing the quality. So it wasn't done just because of the price. It's also factors like sustainability. Think about it that way. 20-liter keg of wine replace around 27 bottles of wine roughly. And can be reused, refilled and reused up to hundreds or even thousands of times. Just imagine what it does for the environment compared to wine bottles. That doesn't matter how sustainable the wine glass they're made of is, they still need to be recycled, reused, then everything that comes with them, corks, foil, etc. So of course, wine keg, much more sustainable. It has its limitation. It's definitely more for younger wines or earlier consumption wines, maybe 1 to 2 years. And wine, because wine doesn't really age in stainless steel. It's what we call an inert vessel. So it doesn't allow ingress of oxygen. It's not like oak or some other materials. The wine stays as it is. It really doesn't age at all. So it's used for younger wines. But also, interestingly, stored in a keg, you need less sulfur dioxide or sulfites for preservation. So that means we can maybe work with low intervention, natural wines stored in kegs. Lower costs, already mentioned, and much more relaxed vibe. Look at that. This is one of my favorite places. It's in London. It's called Fare, F-A-R-E. Another great place that I haven't been, I'm hoping to go soon, is Lois in New York. And guess what? We have one in Barcelona. I'm just going to check your comments quickly to see if anyone's... Yes, it's Fair London, exactly. It's all low intervention, exactly. It's all natural stuff, it's all low intervention. And a great example of a place like that in Barcelona with wines on tap is Salvatge in Gracia, Barcelona. A natural wine bar with wines on tap, as well as by the bottle. But their selection is still pretty interesting. So wine on tap, it is considered, still considered an innovation after so many years because it's now making it to the high end. But not only, a project called Gotham Project, which is essentially a Riesling-based wine from Finger Lakes from New York State in the US, is now served in certain outlets of Shake Shack chain. Not in Europe, unfortunately, I think mostly in the US. Because, you know, importing a wine from New York State is tricky. But yeah, Shake Shack serving Finger Lakes Riesling on tap in some of their outlets. It's a bit of a breakthrough into different areas. What else? Digitized wine lists. And I think here we can, as I said, I'm going to bring it back to Jira's comment. So digitized wine list, again, they have been around for quite a while. Especially now, I think kind of post-COVID or in this new normality we find ourselves in, we're getting used to all the menus and wine lists digitally, but there are many different ways of doing it. You can literally just have a boring PDF. You can have a dedicated website. You can build an app, or you can have a dedicated device like this tablet that normally they work as subscription fee for a restaurant. There's a specific app that's developed by a company, and then there's a cost of the devices, which are typically tablets like the ones you see here. So if you're going to use a digitized wine list, you really got to do a bit more with it than just list all your wines, because as Ajira have been saying, if she's in so she finds herself, say, in Greece with all this new or lesser known grapes and regions that she knows maybe not very much about it, as would all of us when we placed in new situations, there surely must be an easy way to inform the consumer a bit more. So what you can't do is that, of course, you can provide you information about the name of the wine, the producer, the region, vintage, etc. But you can take it a bit further. You can give the flavor profile of the grape. You can describe how the wine is going to taste like roughly. You can show the food pairings. You can do Google Maps of the winery. You can do pictures of the winery. You can incorporate videos from winemakers presenting the wine. You can incorporate video recipes of food that would go with that wine. So again, it's a great way to engage your customer. Mind you, that very interestingly, it does not necessarily replace the figure of sommelier at all. In fact, one place in Barcelona where this digitized wine list is working really well and has been there for a while is a place with probably some of the best trained sommeliers in all the city and in Europe. So they haven't replaced each other. There's a digital wine list and there are fantastic sommeliers to help you. And that place is Montjuïc in Barcelona. That's also in the chat for you. So it doesn't have to replace the human contact. It doesn't have to replace the interaction. It's maybe, it can complement it. So it's maybe aimed at slightly different audience. I think it definitely has its place. It's an investment. It's a bit, the upfront costs are quite big for a restaurant. So it's good to think what added value you're going to bring with that. Because it's not, you're not going to have an iPad just to show the same PDF that people could have on their smartphones by scanning QR codes. It's got to be a bit more than that. And it has to be tied to your stock management so you can stock your cellar in the right way, etc., etc. You have to use it in a really smart way. And last but not least, in my presentation, I think it's probably the least up-to-date technical example in the wine industry, because they have been around for quite a while, but they still considered innovation partly, is new ways of serving wine by the glass. Believe it or not, but for a restaurant to serve wine by the glass is a massive problem, because we open a bottle of wine and immediately it starts, if not deteriorating, changing a lot, because it's exposed to oxygen, potential heat damage, etc., etc. So to offer, say, 30, 40 wines by the glass is very difficult. Great for consumers, great for wine lovers like yourselves, but not so easy for a restaurant. So they came up with different automated serving systems that use what we call blanket storage systems. What they do is when you pour the wine, you take a certain amount of wine out of the bottle, but also you let some oxygen come in, right? You replace that amount of wine roughly. What these different systems do is that they all inject an inert gas that replaces the oxygen and helps protect wine from oxidation and deterioration. The most famous gas being argon. And these machines that you see in the picture called Enomatic have been around for a while, as I've said, and it allows you to preserve your wine longer. It allows certain self-service, if you like, because a customer can come up to a machine using the card, they can choose the size of the pour, and they can help themselves. Or you can have a wine professional do it for you. You can also display certain information, name of the wine, etc. There's an e-label, a little display that allows you to do that. So yeah, different possibilities of pouring wines by the glass. It's particularly interesting for high-end bottles with high prices that you just can't allow go to spoil it. You know, if you're opening a 500 euros bottle of wine, you want your table to have the whole bottle, or you want to sell it by the glass very quickly, trust me. So these different systems, there's Enomatic, there's another one called Coravin, which works a bit like a needle that extracts the wine. That basically brings some some new ways of serving wine by the glass. Not much data collection here. I'm going to talk about data ownership here because the interaction here is quite bare, quite minimal. No apps involved or anything like that. It's literally using a card that's typically given out to you in a wine outlet, or having the wine professional pour it for you, and that's it. And so on this note, on wine by the glass, which I hope you are enjoying or will be enjoying soon, I would like to thank you for your time. There's some other things to share, but I think I've chosen the most exciting and also most commercially viable ones among many projects that are out there in the wine industry. And if anyone likes to drop me a line, keep in touch, has any follow-up in-depth questions, or would like to send me some links of specific projects, you have my email here. I'm happy to leave it in the chat as well. And I'm now going to see if you have any further questions.
Yep. So just quickly from me, I'd like to say thank you so much, Nika. So much information, really, really interesting. I think that was a really comprehensive look at the ways that tech is actually affecting the wine industry from kind of field to actually service. So for me, that was really, really interesting, and I hope it was for everybody else. And like Nika said, we now have time and space for questions. So please feel free to ask her anything. She is really very, very knowledgeable. Don't feel shy. If you do feel shy, this is okay. Just drop something in the chat, and Nika will try to answer your question.
Thank you, Jared. Yes, I do hope you enjoyed it and it wasn't too boring, too technical, too daunting. Hope it's inspired you to think of different things more than anything.
Just in case anyone is still, oh, okay, I can see Rebecca's going to say something, so I'll wait.
Sure, go for it. A remark.
I can also unmute myself, not really shy anyway.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Nika, it's super cool. I do work a lot with tech, not in wine. That's just another thing I do, but two things. First of all, the QR code is actually pretty common on wines, and I see it a lot. A lot of people just put it in their bottles, so you can scan it and it takes you to their website, or it takes you to a technical sheet. Maybe it's kind of low tech because, well, whatever, it's just a kind of link, but I think that's sort of something that I'm looking forward to in the future, having it on more wines. Since now there is a petition to actually list ingredients in wines, and that to make it a legal thing in Europe. So I think that's kind of exciting for the future. And yeah, also AI in wine is super cool. I've been following a lot of things. It's like training machines to just kind of taste any kind of fault even before the wine is ready. So you can just kind of pinpoint it down to taste, which for me takes the excitement away from wine because it's kind of like a living thing for me. So, but it's certainly a cool topic to explore. And thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that. There's definitely a petition and lobbying for listing ingredients on the wines. There's so many things I think the consumer would like and should know about different mystery ingredients in wines. A lot of different additives. When they tell you it's just fermented grape juice, it is for some of the wines, but definitely not for all of them. And great question from Matilde. Why wine on keg is not more popular everywhere if it seems such a great, cost-effective, sustainable alternative? Well, there are a few reasons for kegged wine not being more popular. First of all is upfront cost. It's a large capital investment for a bar or a restaurant to get wine taps in the first place. So the startup costs are quite big. Not everyone can confront them. And second is space, available space. You really need quite a bit of space to store the different wine kegs, because probably unlike beer, you're not going to go into kegged wine operation just offering one or two wine types or brands. You want to have a wide range. And for that, you need quite a lot of space. If you ever make it to fair in London, you will see that underneath and the underground level, they have a serious operation of a lot of different kegs. It looks quite cool, actually. And then it's limited, it's a limitation on the wines. As said, you can't really serve your aged wines, your fine wines in keg. So you have to go for specific profile of wines. And that's another limitation. However, the growth is there. Let's see if it takes over a little bit more and more people start doing it. Thank you for the question. Carolina, thank you. So with Monvinic, let me just double check, because they have a shop and a restaurant. I do hope they did not permanently shut down the restaurant, because I will, if you like, they have a store, which is, they were on holidays, I know they reopened. I heard rumors of Monvinic restaurant shutting down permanently. I do not know if it did. I think Matthew is saying that it did close, which is a big shame, actually. See what happens in the future. It's been, I haven't been back since lockdown, obviously, and I heard rumors that it would. Maybe it will come back. In the meanwhile, Monvinic store, which used to be next to the restaurant, and they have an online shop as well, is also an interesting place to check out. I'm sure there are other digital wine lists in the city. I just, in terms of wine bars, I can't think of anything on top of my head. But if anyone knows of any, let us know. Thank you, Carolina. So as a sommelier, as a wine professional, what's my opinion on AR being used in the industry? Helpful, informative, or gimmicky? Well, because I think it's what Rebecca said and what I've covered as well. Because in the first place, AR in wine is not even aiming at being particularly informative. You have QR codes for that, or you have traditional labels that can give you all the tech information, etc. AR is really there to entertain the consumer, and honestly, I'm all up for all sorts of experiential wine consumption, because I don't think there's enough of that. I don't think wine is enough of an experience. I don't think wine consumption, wine industry is interactive enough. I'm sorry, I honestly think it don't. I think they're doing it quite well in many places in the New World, Australia, US, New Zealand, not so much in Europe. I think we really should lose some of the snobbery and some of the tradition, not completely, but just to let ourselves lose a little bit and let go and embrace some of those things. You have to think that AR is typically used on labels and brands that are mass production wines. I can't really see in the near future a boutique estate from Burgundy going for it. As said, so much history and tradition attached. So there's mass market wines. You're paying your 10 euros or less for a bottle. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of fun and something added to that. So I think it's more than informative and helpful. It's just fun, and it's fine sometimes. Canned wine in Europe. Hope that answered the question. So yes, I'm for it, but also I think it's good to distinguish between different types of wines, different contexts, when you drink them, what you drink them for. Canned wine in Europe, yes, definitely more and more popular in the New World, absolutely massive in the US right now, especially the rosé category. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Slowly canned wine is happening in Europe, France, to a certain extent, UK with their own wines. I've recently tried canned rosé from Artasu, which I've left in the comments, one of my favorite wineries in Navarra, Spain. And I've tried their canned rosé from made with Garnacha, but guess what? It was destined for the US market, because when I polled my wine students and said, what do you guys think? This is Bartasa, look at this cute wine can. They said, no way, not drinking wine from a can. We live in quite, I think, still traditional wine countries, which are Spain, France, and Italy. So I think it will be happening in specific segment of wines. Perhaps we will see it a bit more with low intervention wines, as we see more bag and box. I'm sure you guys seen bag and box. That is not only for cheapest wines, it's definitely for fun, fruity wines where you can buy 3 liter, 5 liter, and sometimes it's excellent quality. Yes, and exactly. And I know what you mean. Carolina is saying not just wine in cans, but also this the screw cup. Okay, the screw cup wine versus our traditional cork. I don't have any on hand, but yes, screw cup wine is still frowned upon in Europe. Absolutely, it's changing. Screw cup wine is slowly being accepted a little bit more. Still a lot of stereotypes about it. People will say that screw cup wine is always cheap, meant to be drank young, uninteresting. Not very true. There is technology that allows wine to age through the screw cup as well now, micro-oxygenation. You can have fairly complex wine. It's not necessarily cheap and cheerful. So don't be afraid of screw cup. As always, I would say, trust the producer, trust the wine. And I think the format sometimes is not that relevant, whether it's cork or screw cup. Another thing, traditional corks are prone to diseases, and we have a cork disease, which makes the wine corked. It's a component called TCA. So of course, use the screw cup, you avoid different conditions like that. Rebecca is asking me about smart corks. I guess, Rebecca, you mean measuring different characteristics in corks. So for example, I think there's a device called Travi that measures the temperature in a cork or sees if a seal has been broken. Do you mean something like that? So there are basically, if I understood your question correctly, specific devices that allow to measure the cork and see what's going on there. Yeah, yes, so that's happening. So what I've told you, cork is a natural product. If it's a natural cork, it's not always reliable. I think I've just read the statistics today in a fantastic book I'm reading called The Wine Girl by Victoria James. Highly recommended to everyone, not even in the wine industry. Just, you know, what women have to face on a daily basis in wine and outside of wine industry. So I think she was saying that 1 bottle in every 6 or 7 cases is corked, at least in the US. So it's a problem. And of course, if we use specific smart devices to measure temperature in the cork, as I said, or see if the seal has been broken, it might help us prevent some of the damage to the cork, some of the problems. I think it's great. I think it's another thing we should be working on, but also I think winemakers should stop in traditional winemaking countries should stop being afraid of using natural cork alternatives. There are sustainably made synthetic corks, screw cups, bag and box, kegged wine, canned wine. I think it's good to start opening up our mental horizons a little bit.
Okay, so I have a question, which now is a bit more broad, but I just want to touch on the fact, because you mentioned this a few times, and I know we've discussed this before about the difficulties in the industry for women. And this goes across the board. I mean, from women winemakers, also up to people working in restaurants, so sommeliers and this type of thing as well. I want to try and connect it to tech a bit, but you can go outside the topic. Do you think that kind of the increase in tech that has been happening within the industry, so maybe, for example, I can think of more tech might mean that there can be more women winemakers if you talk about the really old ways of making wine versus how much easier it is to do now, and it's not so labor intensive, etc. Do you think that tech is having a positive influence in terms of reducing gender disparity in the industry? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, so just your opinion. And if not, what do you think are the steps kind of that need to be taken by the wine industry to make sure that there's actually going to be, there's kind of like a fairness between actually getting more women to be involved from the beginning to the end of the whole pipeline, basically? Yes,
so I guess the first part of the question is fairly complex, at least for me to answer, to monitor the real impact of tech on gender imbalance or maybe balance and equality. I guess it would also be quite geographically specific. So say if you're looking at California and you're looking at women in tech, tech-related startups in the wine industry? I guess you could say yes, tech is making positive impact, but that's because generally tech industry gender composition is changing quicker, let's say specifically in California than in some other parts of the world. I'm generalizing, of course. So perhaps there, yes, but it's a very specific context we're talking about. The democratization I was talking before, that certain smart technology is offering, yes, potentially. I think further research, further scientific research being involved in the wine industry is probably means that gender imbalance is being corrected, because as we know that in specific areas of science, it's not so bad in terms of percentages of women. But what I do want to address, what you brought up as well, is in tech, in wine and tech specifically, it's still it goes very much by, let me put this right. The big problem right now in the wine industry generally, I'm going to include wine and tech, is female representation on top management positions and also in specific salary tiers. So if we're looking generally, I'm a little bit more familiar with US statistics just because there is more statistics on that. Let's say up to more or less middle management, the situation might look okay and the female representation would be decent. But really, when we start looking at top management, this is when it all goes really wrong. And we're looking at just some ridiculously small percentages of women. And I think female leadership, positions of leadership, decision-making positions, it's something that we should really be addressing. Generally, being a winemaker is still considered a male-dominated world. Many times, a female winemaker in different parts of the world would be at a wine fair, and a customer would come up, or a potential partner or client, and they would ask, where is the winemaker? That is still happening. This is something we need to address. Women in wine are still being associated with areas like marketing, communication, wine tourism, etc., what traditionally have been determined as female roles. So yes, being a female winemaker on one hand, and being in those positions of power and decision making, I think is something quite challenging still. And the salary gap, the higher we go on that ladder, is just staggering. Also, if you look at the top professionals in the field, so there's an Institute of Masters of Wine, there's also a Court of Master Sommeliers, that has been going through some controversy recently. If you look at the makeup, at the gender makeup of their members, out of 180 plus Master Sommeliers, 29 are women. And out of Masters of Wine, it's a little bit better. Out of 380, 121 are women. So just for the rest of you, those are top qualifications. It's people spend a lot of time and money to obtain, and still we can see that's not enough female represented. And to finish answering the question, sorry, it's obviously touches upon a lot of things and it's fairly emotional for me. I've recently read a she's still editor-in-chief of the Wine Advocate. That's Robert Parker's publication. So if you've heard about Parker Points, etc., although Robert Parker's retired, Wine Advocate is still there. So editor-in-chief, who is a woman, Lisa Perotti-Brown, confessed that as editor-in-chief of that magazine, she has never once worked for a woman. And I think this is very telling. Someone who works in a prestigious wine publication, she has never had a female boss. So certain things are going to have to change. And I think this is why there's a lot of female women in wine associations popping up around the world. It's a necessary change. Hope that answered the question. I'm sorry I didn't touch too much on tech. I guess don't have enough data to answer that as I would like to.
No, that was a really good answer. The only reason why I related it to tech is because I once spoke to a winemaker here from, I'm having a blank now on the region because my brain isn't working. You know the region, Nika, say where Pals is? Which region is this?
Emporda, yes.
Emporda, thank you. And she was just talking about how she came from a family, and generally it was always men in the family who were the winemakers. It's a very small kind of farm wine kind of industry that she works within. But when her father didn't have any sons, some of his friends and other people in the industry were saying to him, oh, okay, now there's not going to be anyone to continue the winemaking tradition of the family. They've been making wine since the 1200s, like just farm wines, people from the local community coming. And the father said, I mean, I have 3 daughters, so there's definitely people who can take over the industry. It doesn't need to be men who are in this thing. And she was saying that, I mean, she says now she went to school, she was the only person who was there doing going through school to become a winemaker. And many people were saying, I mean, how are you going to cope with things? And she was saying, I mean, it's not the same. Technology has helped so much. You don't need, this image of this big strong man batting down the wines with a pole. Like things are regulated now. Technology has made so many differences. There's no need for these opinions that we have on winemaking being a really physical male dominated thing. So yeah, I just asked it from that context, basically.
Yes. No. So it's as you pointed out, it's very true. And as I've said, in different parts of the world, winemaker is still considered a female profession. I recently interviewed a spirits winemaker. So she makes artisanal liquors from natural organic products in the south of Catalonia in Conca de Barberà. And she's young. She's, I think, roughly my age, maybe a little bit younger. Spirits industry is even more male dominated than wines. Every single wine fair, she would get, men of certain age come up to her booth and asking after her boss. She would get potential clients visiting the distillery and asking when the boss will be back. So she just has to deal with it on a pretty much daily basis. So spirits, especially in SET, traditional winemaking countries, is stayed a bit even more in the past.
Okay, so just to check, does anybody else have any more questions? Because we're about at the half an hour mark, but if there's anything else that you want to sneak in quickly, please do. Okay, then if not, again, like Nika said, she is available by email if anyone wants to ask any other questions. And she's given you some information in the chat. So yeah, oh wait, I have a new message. Okay, yes, Nika's put her email. So please feel free to ask her questions. From my point, I just want to say that the project that Nika is doing is super cool, and I advise everyone to follow what she's doing. Obviously, because of the circumstances, it's not as robust as what she was able to do last year, but she's still been doing talks this year. She's been going through the alphabet and doing talks about things like Chardonnay, etc. Nika, if you want to drop your Instagram in there too.
Yes, no, thank you, Jiro.
I encourage you to follow
online
her.
Courses, guys. So
Exactly.
as Jiro said, as I've said in the beginning, I had to go digital very quickly with the lockdown. So wine alphabets tastings are happening, but they're mostly happening online. If you're based in Barcelona, there's also ways for you to sit along during the kind of similar Zoom environment with slides and interaction. So yes, wine alphabets is where you'll find the information. Thank you, Jiro.
Okay,
Hopefully
and thank you.
Won't stay digital forever.
No, or there'll be a good combination of both, which is super good because then you get to expand your audience. And I always think that so much knowledge shouldn't be contained within one area. So yeah, we look forward to seeing what happens in terms of how that rolls out. But like, as I said, please follow, please ask questions. We have another SubVersions event coming up, so stay tuned. This will be in a few more weeks, and it's tech and activism. Otherwise, I hope you really enjoyed today. And again, a big thank you to Nika for coming, for joining us and giving us all this information. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys their evening.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ajira. Thanks to CodeOp, and thanks to everyone for joining.
Okay.
Hope you enjoyed it.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.